Aloha, my name is Brian Popp. I'm a professor with the Department of Geology and Geophysics and Marine Biology. I'm also on the graduate faculty at the Department of Oceanography at the University of Hawaii at Manoa. The University of Hawaii Sea Grant program, otherwise known as Hawai'i Sea Grant, is based at the University of Hawaii at Manoa in Honolulu. Hawai'i Sea Grant supports an innovative program of research, education, and extension services directed to the improved understanding and stewardship of the coastal and marine resources in the state of Hawaii, the region, as well as the nation. Hawai'i Sea Grant, podcast number 6, Filter Feeders.
Aloha and welcome to our 321 podcast. My name is Mahealani.
This is Rachel.
This is Brian.
And I'm Leilei.
And we are part of Hawai'i Sea Grant and the University of Hawaii, located in Honolulu, Hawaii.
This podcast features research supported by Hawai'i Sea Grant. Each episode will highlight a new project and the people that make that project possible.
We will ask these researchers for 3 words that describe their research. Give them 2 minutes to explain how their research benefits communities here in Hawaii, and end by asking them to provide one thing they know about each other than their research. So 3 words, 2 minutes, and 1 thing. It's a 321 podcast. Hey, have you ever seen those natural bathing sponges?
Yeah, but I'm always a little disappointed that they aren't absorbent and yellow and porous like SpongeBob.
I heard they make you itchy.
Yeah, we wouldn't recommend bathing with it.
And we don't have that species of sponge here in Hawaii.
Oh, really?
Oh.
No.
So, what are 3 words that describe your research?
Squishy.
Invasive.
Filter feeder.
Okay, so the 3 words that you use to describe your research are squishy, invasive, filter feeder. Let's start with squishy.
So squishy because when you touch the sponge, it feels squishy.
Not slimy?
No, not slimy, just squishy.
How about invasive?
Well, the sponge is an invasive species. It means that it didn't grow naturally in Hawaii. It was actually brought in the ballast water of a ship. And so it was released from that ship when that ship was in port, and it started to grow in Hawaii.
And let's see, filter feeder.
So sponges are filter feeders. That means they get their food by filtering seawater, and that's why they're called filter feeders.
We're learning about sponges in this podcast, specifically how sponges affect water chemistry and other marine life in Kaneohe Bay. Here to share their research are Dr. Brian Popp and his graduate student, Leilei Shih.
Before we ask you how your research benefits communities here in Hawaii, let's talk about a few scientific words. So 3 words that you use a lot in your research are sponges, biogeochemical, and nitrogen. Can you explain what these words mean?
So sponges are a simple multicellular organism that has been on Earth for at least 600 million years.
So when you say organism, do you mean a plant or do you mean an animal?
So sponges are an animal. They're
Okay.
a simple multicellular animal. Sponges acquire food and the other things that they need by filtering seawater. It's surprising how much water they can pump. For example, some sponges in the Caribbean can filter the entire volume of an Olympic-sized pool in just a few days.
So that's a lot of water.
Yeah,
That's crazy, actually.
it's pretty amazing.
So what about biogeochemical?
Well, to understand biogeochemical, we can dissect the word. So it's biology, geology, and chemistry, and it's the interaction of all of those fields. When we think about geology, well, the rocks dissolve, and when they dissolve, they release things like nitrogen and phosphorus, which are elements that are also fertilizers for plant growth that are required. And biology is the organisms that use that.
Nitrogen is important because it's a nutrient in the ocean. It's really important in Kaneohe Bay because it is a limiting nutrient, meaning the different biological processes in the bay are controlled by the amount of available nitrogen in the bay. So you may know nitrogen as a fertilizer for plants in soils. It also has a lot of different roles in the ocean. The microbial biogeochemical reactions in sponges sort of drive the transformation of nitrogen from one form into another form that may be more usable, and thereby can kind of alter the different ecosystem dynamics that are happening in the bay.
So tell us, in 2 minutes or less, how your research benefits the communities here in Hawaii.
The sponge we're studying, Mycale grandis, is an invasive species. It was introduced to Hawaii, as we mentioned, in the ballast water in ships, and it was really only first reported, somebody really only first saw it around the late 1990s. So it hasn't been around for very long. And since it's an invasive species, that means any role it is playing within the ecosystem is new and is causing some kind of change on the coral reef.
And of course, coral reefs where sponges live are really important to, in general, to the state and the communities, because so much livelihood depends upon those coral reefs. You know, without coral reefs, the waves wouldn't break and there wouldn't be surf breaks. Also, coral reefs are beautiful. People come from all over the world to snorkel and scuba dive on our coral reefs. They're lovely. And so coral reefs are important as one of the main economic drivers of Hawaii tourism. Sponges, they're not very hard, of course, and you can imagine if sponges took over a coral reef, it would change things dramatically. But we think that they're actually changing the chemistry of ocean water around reefs, maybe for the better. We just don't know yet.
And in some places, sponges can actually help hold together a crumbling reef as it's recovering. So we don't really want to say if it's good or bad. It can be either or neither.
So let's recap. When asked to provide 3 words that describe your research, you said squishy, invasive, filter feeder. You provided definitions for 3 scientific words that are commonly used in your research. These words were sponges, biogeochemical, and nitrogen. We've learned about your research and how your research will help communities here in Hawaii. Okay, so let's get technical. How do you do your research?
A day-to-day field work would look like going out into the field, and you get to snorkel and you dive, and I'll collect sponges for the various experiments that I'll be doing. From those samples, I might take smaller tissue samples for different types of analyses. I might put the sponges in aquariums and labs to let them grow, to let them adapt to that situation. And as we've been talking about throughout this podcast, one of the interesting things about sponges is that they pump a lot of water. So in order to measure their pumping rate, or how much water they pump, I can actually add this bright green fluorescent dye and watch the sponge take up this dye and pump it through their body, and from that get a rate. And it's really, really a cool thing to watch.
Cool.
Wow. So you could see how fast that dye moves.
Yes.
And since the dye is already in water, you could see how that water
Exactly.
would move through the animal.
Exactly.
That's pretty cool.
Well, that's a wrap. But before we go, we want to ask you, Brian, what is one thing you know about Leilei other than her research?
Leilei's passionate. She's really, really passionate about the environment.
So she's a tree hugger, an ocean warrior,
A sponge hugger, you mean?
estuary enthusiast.
Yeah, I'd
She's-
say more a sponge hugger, not a tree hugger.
I see. Because they're squishy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
see? Exactly.
Oh, gotcha.
And Leilei, what's one thing you know about Brian other than his research?
He is a big seafood lover. He loves seafood. I think that's why he likes spending so much time out at sea, and probably the real reason why he became an oceanographer in the first place.
Is that true?
It is. It is.
What is
I
your
knew
favorite? What is your favorite?
I love sashimi.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
It's good. It's good stuff. All right, well, stay tuned for our next podcast, and mahalo for listening. Aloha.
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 This Hawai'i Sea Grant 321 podcast featured 3 songs. Happiness by bensound.com, Ukulele by bensound.com, and Cute by bensound.com. Find it on iTunes or bensound.com.